All right, let's move on to the Republic of Ireland football team. Gary Breen is with us. Gary, you've got Kerry roots, do you?
Yeah, my dad's from Kerry, and I would have grown up supporting that great 70s, 80s team. And just listening there, I mean, you said the producers were saying, listen, we're going to hold on a couple of minutes. And I was saying, listen, keep me on the back burner as much as you want. I'd rather listen to those legends talking about the game. Certainly Kieran Donaghy's one of them. When I grew up watching that great team and the disappointment of when they lost that 5 in a row to Offaly, I remember even the likes of Bomber Liston, and then suddenly when you're playing professional football yourself, then you see the likes of Kieran Donaghy, who gives you that physicality up front for Kerry, and it's brilliant. It's a sad day, obviously, but as we know with Kerry, one great legend retires, another one comes to the fore, and certainly we've got someone like Clifford coming through now. Yeah,
it's sickening for all the rest of us who aren't from Kerry or don't have Kerry roots, that it's like, oh, there's a production line here of what seemed like generational talents, and then it's literally their generation that they become the defining talent for. Let's talk about the situation with Ireland. I mean, last night...
Not quite a production line with a soccer team, unfortunately, but nevertheless, the lads last night gave a really good account of themselves, and it was pleasing, really, because I'm sure they would have seen everything that was happening throughout, the whole dramas, and these guys are saying, well, listen, just give me my chance. They listen, as a footballer, you're looking at the performance against Wales, and those guys on the bench in the squad will be thinking, I can do better than that, and a lot of them proved that they could.
Yeah. What was the difference? So obviously we played with a 3-5-2, 5-3-2, whatever. However, 3 centre backs was the kind of batten down the hatches approach to last night, and it seems to suit a little bit our mentality at the moment, and certainly our confidence levels. And we played reasonably good football for most of the game last night.
We did, and what the most noticeable thing, just even watching on the television, was the distances between our players. It seemed that wherever we were on the pitch, there was good distances between the units. We covered the whole width of the pitch. We had 2 in attack, so when we went forward, we had numbers. When we went back, we had numbers. But notably in midfield, we looked like we had a presence in there that we never had at all against Wales. We were so stretched. And certainly that back 3/5 suits us a little bit in terms of it covers a little bit of your inadequacies as such. Having the 3 centre-halves in there just was coped a little bit more with balls that were put in the box. And you have to say that they gave a really good account of themselves. And I think it's taken a little bit of the pressure off of Martin O'Neill. But as well as they played, I'm under no illusions that they've been coached for the last 3 or 4 days in that system. I just think we've seen the likes of John Egan playing that way for his club at Sheffield United, Stevens also, Williams as well in midfield, and they brought that kind of club form, that know-how into the national team, and that was really positive to see.
Yeah, like the point you're making about the distance between the players, that was exactly one of the things that people were speaking about in the aftermath of the Wales game. It was like, this does not look like a group who have had work done on their shape, work done on the training pitch to define exactly what everybody's role is, and that got flipped in such a short period of time. What's the explanation for that?
Well, just what I said, that players will play in positions that they play for their clubs. So all the coaching that they've had at club level, they're able to bring it onto the international stage. I just think that the setup, this is not taking anything away. This obviously took a lot of pressure off of the management team, but I'm not convinced that they've worked on tirelessly on the training field to get a performance like they did last night. If you talk about the strengths of certain people, Christie is a wing back. The fact that you're playing right midfield, all of Christie's strength is coming from deep onto the ball and using his pace. And we saw that for the way he broke from midfield and got that strike off that the centre-half done well to come across and cut off. He's not a right winger in terms of taking balls with his back to play. That's for certain. I think Keogh as captain gave a lot of enthusiasm, a bit of positivity. Would probably have said to the players, come on boys, this is an opportunity now to silence a little bit of doubters. And for his first start in 12 games or so, he was good. Egan at centre-half looked so composed at times. I know he gave the ball away on a couple of occasions trying to hit those long balls over the top, because it was obviously identified that they were going to try and get in behind with Robinson. But even O'Brien, the way from centre forward, he was coming back and linking at 10, taking the ball in a half turn, was something we never saw against Wales. So there were a lot of positives, there really was. And notably O'Dowd in that left-hand side of a central 3. This is a guy who can pick up the ball deep. He's got the ability to then carry us up the pitch. And I thought he was a real positive, and it was capped by that brilliant first touch and great delivery for the goal.
Yeah, like you mentioned there, players playing in positions for Ireland that they do for their clubs, and you mentioned John Egan there, obviously playing in a 3-man defence with Sheffield United at the moment. How big an advantage is that when you're playing in a 3 for your club, going into a 3 at international level? Because we were just speaking about it before we dialed you up there this morning, that potentially we could now see the future of a back 3/back 5 for Ireland, or do we just not have enough players who are playing in a back 3 for their clubs to be able to achieve that?
No, I think we have got the players to do it, and I don't think it's I think it's been a bit of a surprise, really, that Martin hasn't pursued it more, bearing in mind, if you think of his success for Leicester, that was 3 at the back. I remember playing against that, the likes of Taggart, Elliott, Spencer Pryor, likewise at Celtic. And you guys were talking about that there's a false belief that all 3 have to be comfortable and they ball. They don't. Do you remember Baldo Baldi? You didn't want him to have the ball in that defence for Celtic, that's for certain. But they are, all those boys can look after the ball. And what you have in a 3 is you have options. And that was the most noticeable thing as well last night, is that whenever someone got the ball, there was a pass of 5 or 6 yards away, 10 yards away. It wasn't a case of receiving the ball, looking up and thinking, where do I pass it? They all had simple passes, so you can play yourself into the game. You don't have to be a Rio Ferdinand stepping in, breaking lines, although Egan was comfortable doing it. I'm not sure if that was because he had the number 10 shirt on his back, which looks so strange as a centre-half. But there are options. There can potentially be more if Declan Rice comes back on board. I know you guys are saying about a left-hand side of a 3 and Kieran Clark's played poorly his last few games, but nevertheless, when you think of his strength, he can step in on that left-hand side and keep the game balanced. So there's a lot to digest over the next 3 or 4 weeks before the big double header, and I'm sure the management team will do that.
We were having this debate over the last couple of days as well about how do we rescue the situation from 2 weeks ago, the press release gets sent out where there's no Declan Rice in the team. And from that moment until Ireland scored last night, there was this sense of chaos enveloping the team from the WhatsApp, from the conversations around that, from all the leaks that were coming out. All of a sudden, it seems like the international break is over. Players go back to their clubs. The stories die down. Mostly, if they can somehow make peace with Harry Arter, and if they can somehow get Declan Rice back, then suddenly, on the face of it, it looks like a unified squad with plenty to play for and maybe a bit of a new identity by playing 3 at the back. It's like...
listen, I'm not convinced it's a unified squad in terms of what's happened. I know Kenny Cunningham come on and said this isn't a quick fix, but they have to address the matter in terms of getting people together and talking. But you're right. I'm so glad this international period is over and they are going back to... Because I cannot listen to another press conference in terms of Martin O'Neill talking about this, and his attempts to be funny, talking about Coronation Street and stuff like that. Let's just go away. Let's just regroup. Let's see who is available, who's coming back from injury. I know there's a massive concern now that our captain will potentially miss the doubleheader. That's a massive loss, of course it is. But we just need to just step away from it, let the dust settle a little bit, let them do a lot of work behind the scenes that we're not seeing and not hearing about every day, which we have done over the last couple of weeks. That's what I'm looking forward to, and then we'll see where we are from there.
Yeah, it's going to be... I'm not sure, are we in fantasy land talking about that potential this morning? Like, Ger doesn't believe that Declan Rice has any hope of coming back to the squad. I think if you read the papers this morning, it looks like Harry Arter will, so it comes back to Rice again. And, what do you think? Is he looking at this from the outside now? Is he looking at last night's performance and thinking, right, okay, they're starting to steady the ship a little bit. Whatever happened there, he may not have taken it overly personal, and it was just kind of him taking a pit stop in his international career. And really, so to speak, Declan Rice is up for grabs again.
Yeah, listen, you guys are talking about, would it be a coup now for Martin O'Neill to convince him to come back? Listen, Martin O'Neill's going to play no role in this. No doubt about it. He'll make his mind up. It's as simple as that. And likewise, I don't blame Martin O'Neill for him reversing his decision as such. I don't blame the manager, and I won't give him a lot of credit for bringing him back, because it won't be a case of having to convince him. Declan will make his own mind up. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And
yeah.
Kind of already have your mind made up, but he's still a young man, and sometimes it's difficult to over a period of time, and then you let people down gently. That's what it feels like to me from the outside, and having absolutely no indication from or any is actually saying to him. But it does feel like the pressure coming on from the club and from the manager and from the English FA just is a bit too concerted and choreographed for my liking, for it to be let's just do this and flutter it up the flagpole and see what happens. All in all, where do you think we are at the moment? Is it more or less likely that the current managerial team will still be in charge when the actual qualifiers for the next European Championship start at the moment, Gary?
Well, listen, like for any manager, results dictate that. Of course they do. And certainly the performances in the last two competitive games put any management under pressure, despite the fact that you're two of Ireland's most famous sons. And I think a lot of supporters now, quite rightly, as they should do, are dissecting what they're actually doing and saying, OK, how are they influencing this Irish team? Can they take us forward? And even Martin O'Neill's reference to Roy Keane, let's not forget that this is the Roy Keane that drove Manchester United to the titles. It's not the same Roy Keane. That's Roy Keane, the player. What's that reference? It's complete and utter nonsense as such. Why doesn't he reference that this is a Roy Keane who drove Sunderland to the title in the Championship? The Roy Keane is a manager that consolidated Sunderland in the Premier League at a time when they were struggling to do that. They're the references that need to be made in terms of what Roy Keane is doing right now in his professional career. Not the fact that he was a brilliant player, which he was. We're talking about a player who goes down, in my opinion, in the greatest Premier League team of all time. He'd make that 11 without a shadow of a doubt. So I don't understand the references, and that this is what I alluded to earlier. Every time Martin O'Neill does a press conference, I just think, no, please end this.
Yeah. Do you think he's been relatively satisfied with what's happened? Not satisfied, that's the wrong word, but it's been convenient for Martin O'Neill that the performance against Wales last week wasn't really spoken about, and to a lesser extent when it came to the politics behind the scenes, he definitely wasn't being talked about because it was all about Roy Keane. Do you think Martin O'Neill was just sitting back watching like the explosions going off everywhere, pretty happy with the fact that it wasn't all about him?
I think to a certain extent, but I think there's a new younger type of pundit who dissect how the team's performing. They don't really get involved in all the nonsense of the PR spin that the FAI are trying to do or have tried to do, even leading into the Wales game. The fact that Martin O'Neill was sitting down over a couple of weeks talking to every journalist, obviously talking to you guys, Joe, as well, and trying to reintegrate himself back with the supporters as such. I think there's some ex-professionals who see through all that and just want to know what you're doing on a pitch. To a certain extent, what's happening off it, the arguments that Roy's having with players, does it make a massive difference? Ultimately, it looks like it has in terms of the storm it's created, but it doesn't in terms of what's happening on the pitch.
Yeah, that my take on all of this is that the next two big games, which are proper internationals where you can't wheel on 15 subs or whatever, they're actually going to be hugely important, and they will ultimately, I think, decide whether or not he's still in charge for the European qualifiers.
More often than not, what you see when at club level, certainly, and I've experienced it when managers have got sacked, is that initially the supporters are on the players, then they turn on the manager as such. But then when they start to, and the chairman still backs the manager, but then when the supporters start to turn on the chairman, that's when you see decisions being made. And I think now there's a lot of talk now about pressure going on Delaney in terms of how he's handling this situation. So he might be pressured into making a decision. I know there's a lot of chain of thought that because of the contracts they're on, the FAI can't afford to remove them. But ultimately, he has to start running the ship a little bit better than they have done at this stage, because all this drama, it's a bit embarrassing, really, in terms of other countries looking on and what's happening, and it's a nonsense, really, and that allied to the fact that the team is not playing anywhere near the level we associate with Ireland teams.
I think you're dead right to focus on Delaney, but every qualifying campaign is obviously unbelievably important, but this is literally the one with the biggest prize at the end of it. We'll get to play a tournament match in Dublin if we qualify, and so if he thinks that somehow that party is going to be pooped and that he won't be able to sit there in the Aviva and put his arms up to the entire stadium, and it's going to be Martin O'Neill's fault that doesn't happen, then you can see a case where he's like, well, I need to get somebody in here who's going to make sure that we qualify for this thing.
Yeah, listen, I think there'll be short-term view in terms of getting the kind of togetherness with the squad again and trying to get the supporters back on side, but there'll definitely be long-term thinking, and with that, as you quite rightly said, that amazing opportunity for us to be playing at home in a major championship. But listen, this is all speculation, because it really is a massive doubleheader next month, because you think of the fact that if we don't win those games and we effectively go into pot 3 for the seeding for the Euros, we're really up against it then.
Yeah. Gary, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.
Gary Breen giving us some very interesting thoughts this morning.